The first time I heard music was associated, I'm sure, with the synagogue, with singing in the choir, with the services as such. When I first heard classical music, my father would take me to the opera. I was about 4 or maybe even 3.5.
¿Cómo se llama? Murray Perahia.
Tiene 33 años.
Tiene 33 años.
Es famoso.
Sí, es famoso.
What he's now doing, he's a pianist.
He's a concert artist.
What's his name?
Murray Perahia.
He used to go to 22.
Yes.
I know y'all proud of him.
And
Very much
I'm
so.
sure they would be.
Much so.
He played the piano for the Glee Club here. And, well, from here he went on, and now he's a concert artist. He plays all over the world.
Their son is a piano player. How long was his son?
He's 34 years old now. So it was a long time when he attended school.
Yes.
The work I've been studying recently is the Piano Concerto of Mozart, Köchel 503, in C major. It's one of the great concertos that Mozart composed around the time of his opera Figaro. This concerto will be part of a tour I'll be doing with the English Chamber Orchestra. The English Chamber Orchestra is an orchestra I love to play with and have done so very often. This concert now is in London. And after that, we're going on to Aldeburgh, and we're playing in Leeds and in Paris, and we do the Greenwich Festival and quite a few other concerts. I was born in New York in 1947. And I spent most of my life in New York. My parents were born in Greece. My father is in Salonika. Well, they came to the States around 1937, and they married about 1.5 years before I was born. And they lived in the Bronx, which is quite different than it is now, actually. It was predominantly a Jewish neighborhood at that time, predominantly middle class.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav.
We were a religious family. My father tended to be rather religious. We had a very close family. We went to synagogue every Saturday at least, which is to say many other days as well. There's not that much of a community of Sephardic Jews anywhere in the world. And in all of these places, wherever they went, they still spoke in Spanish. It's unusual, for instance, today, this Spanish, because it's in a way close, and yet it's far from spoken Spanish today, that it would be something like if some person from the 15th century would come into this room and say, "How art thou?" It was Ladino, which was the language of the Sephardic Jews when they left Spain, when they were expelled in 1492. This was the language that I first learned, and I had to learn English, actually, when I went to school. I always loved to play the piano. I remember in school, in kindergarten even, I would sort of hunger towards the pianos.
This is the kindergarten that Murray entered, and he didn't know how to speak English because he spoke nothing but Spanish at home. When he came here, he just didn't know how to get along with the children together. And naturally, we had a little hard time to convince him that he was an American, and he grew up here. And then gradually he learned how to speak English so very, very well.
The way he became acquainted was by just playing the piano for the teacher in the kindergarten class. And from then on, they all knew him.
And the schools that I went to, like PS 114, were right in the neighborhood, very close and convenient, and very nice schools as I remember them. I had to work hard to be a good student. I couldn't be a good student naturally. I just wanted to be in music, and I loved playing the piano, and I loved participating in, well, whatever music there was going. That's exactly where the problem is. It's a little bit better, but that third measure is slowing us down. Also, I'd like a richer sonority from everybody. I don't want da, ba, a kind of warm sonority all the way through, in all the instruments. 3, 4. I do extensive tours everywhere, but I always come back to home, which is London. It's London where we rehearse the Mozart 503 with the English Chamber Orchestra. There are two things I'd like to hear. One, the oboe going from A to A flat. Da, da, dee. And all of us, could we put a slight crescendo over these two measures? Don't make accents on the low notes. Ba-dum-bum-bum, ba-dum-bum-ba-dum, ba-dum-bum-bum. But that was much better. That's at least a steady crescendo. Well, no, in the cellos it could be forte, actually. From the cellos and basses, that's important. Sorry, forget about that. That's important. First violins. 1, 2, 3. You see, I think you have to go down to poco forte to match that sound. With 8, it's too much. So could you just try once more to get the sound of the flute? 1, 2, 3. My father would try to take me at first to concerts where there was an easy escape. And I think that we went and heard Jose Iturbi play probably the Emperor Concerto, because that was one of the concertos that my father liked very much, and so we often went to either that or the Tchaikovsky B-flat.
During the intermission, he asked me to go and see the musicians, and I took them over and I showed them the first violins, the second violins, the cellos, the clarinets, and everything else. And in the meanwhile, the chimes went on again, so that we go. And he says to me, loud, he says, "Daddy, come on, let's go and sit down quick before they start." And we went and we sit down. And as we sit down, the orchestra started again. And we went home. The following evening, I saw Murray on the front of the radio with the pencil in his hand, is conducting the orchestra. He was 3.5 years old.
I would go to these concerts, always coming back home, and either singing through the pieces or conducting them if they were on the radio, or in some way remembering them musically, that is, through sounds. The first concert my father ever took me to, I think, was Toscanini's very last concert where he had this very incredible memory slip. There's a famous picture of him with his hands on his head, lost, where he decided after this concert that he wasn't going to conduct anymore because it was just, he was losing his memory, which was the one thing that was most incredible about him, as well as, of course, the other great musical qualities he had. And as a result of that, he stopped conducting. And I think that that was the very first concert I went to. And then Rubinstein was a very important musical figure in New York at those days, giving marathon recitals, something like 10 recitals in a row, playing all the music for piano practically, and all the piano concertos and everything like that. So I tried to attend with my father as many of those concerts as I could. All the inner voices out of the way so I can hear that. 3, 4, go. Could you play? This bothered me before. Yeah, a longer stroke. I don't want ba, 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 ba. What, you have other dots there over them? No, forget, no, don't. I studied first with a neighborhood teacher. And then at 6, my father decided that I should have, well, more intensive instruction. And so we had the name of a man who worked at WQXR, which was the music station in New York. His name was Abram Chasins. He was a pupil of Hoffman. And he was a very important person. And when he first saw me, I remember he thought, oh, what is this little kid going to play for me? I don't want to waste my time. But he did waste his time, and he recommended me to Jeanette Hayne, who was then my teacher really from the age of 6 till the age of 17. Really my main piano teacher.
He was tiny. He was very intense. His eyes were very black. He had a very marked brow for a small child, and it's a face without boundaries. He had a tiny little hand, a very articulate little hand. He, of course, couldn't reach the pedals. I had a platform built, and he would sit with his legs on this platform. I attribute a kind of way Murray hears, and those long, extraordinary legato arcs of melodies that he can create from the fact that all the legato was done with the hand. The foot was never involved for years.
I studied with Miss Hayne. I remember it vividly. I was, in a sense, her first student because she was 22 when I came to her. And I think I was sort of a project. She wanted to do as much as she could for me, and she worked very, very hard. Really much harder than I could expect any other teacher to work. Wait, could you connect to me? It's too loud, that kind of piano forte. It has to be sort of polka forte, but then the balance has to be such that we can connect together. Let's just try it right there. Yeah, sorry, it bothered me before. I don't want this place in all the instruments too athletic. Bum 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 beat and then bum 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 with a lot of pathos. That's da 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 da. Just because it's forte doesn't make it pop 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 pop. Okay, from diminuendo. Sorry.
In an extraordinary way, he existed in a world within the world.
Don't accent the first beat there. I had a lot of close friends that were my age, and we played a lot of ball games that, I mean, it was a very normal childhood as I remembered it. My relationship with my brother was basically always very, very good. We always would have play fights. I think that's a normal part of childhood. We always wanted to beat each other up. I think we kept on as good friends as long as we could, and then our lives went separate ways around when I was, well, getting more serious about music, and he was getting more serious about engineering. He became a mechanical engineer. And then the divergences took more precedence over the things that we had in common. And some distance grew. He got married and lived in Staten Island with his wife. I started to live in England, and I've gotten married since. And in a sense, we're not far apart, basically, but we're far apart in terms of distance and in terms of how much we see each other.
His daughter.
The piano teacher informed us both that we would have to practice, I think it was about an hour a day. And I said, you mean in addition to taking lessons? And she said, yes. And Murray said, fine, and I said, no way.
My brother, who was a year and a half younger than I, was really, I think, my best friend for the longest time. And I appreciated that he wasn't a musician, because it gave me a chance. He wasn't at all interested in music, actually. In fact, I think at a certain age he got to hate it, very distinctly. I think it was after I gave him a few piano lessons. And it was wonderful that he wasn't a musician, because at night, after a day's work, we could talk about millions of subjects so that I could get away from music.
When he was, I think, 11 was really when he began to use the pedal, and he developed very quickly a very sophisticated foot or pair of feet.
We've just got daggers.
No, take everything out. See, all of that is that rhythmic figure pop before this piano. Make a diminuendo towards the top note. I need also, what I mainly want to hear is the oboe. And so you're just vibrating on what should have been his high note.
When he was 12 or 13, it seemed to me the moment was right to expose him to another world, the world of chamber music. And I had long had an older colleague whom I admired deeply, Arthur Balsam. And I thought he would be an ideal person to work with Murray in this regard.
In playing chamber music, you have to listen. The pianist has to listen, open his ears and listen to what the others are playing in order to balance the sound of the piano with the other instrument. Now, once he gets used so much, when playing so much with others, to listen carefully to the other instrument, he will also listen carefully to the other voices in his own playing.
It was his first time away from home. That is, away from parental home. And it was marvelous to see him awaken to so much that summer, because he was essentially a child of the city.
Could we go from the major? Bum, 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 bim, bum, bim. I need to hear more oboe at that place. Da, 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 bum, bum.
Say one.
1, 2, 3. You see, that's a 2, 3, 4, 1. There are a few funny notes in it. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's some strange. You've got it. I don't have it. Actually, there are a few strange.
and I should be fine.
There are a few stranger notes than should be. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah, that's it. It's actually up in sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's it.
All of the principles, all of the things that we had been talking about for then 4 or 5 years began to manifest themselves, absolutely to funnel themselves in a kind of focus for him. And that extraordinary thing happens, which must, if you're going to be an artist, where he stopped seeing himself as doing this, and a great thing he saw in the landscape, such as one might come on Mount Everest. He saw the whole literature, the whole body of the repertoire, the history behind him, the composers, Mozart and Beethoven and Schubert. And he saw then that he would form a relationship to it. He must. He did. He knew to, which is a great part of talent.
I had to go to college. I wanted to go to a music college, and it was difficult to find out which one I should go to. So Jeanette Hayne was friendly with Mannes. She wasn't at that time teaching there, but she knew Leopold Mannes, and the school was really right around the corner. It was 1 block away. My whole musical education, in a sense, took place in a distance of 2 blocks.
I wanted him to have a particular kind of training and theory, and I knew that that place existed at Mannes College of Music. There was Carl Schachter, a rich treasure of a mind musically.
When Murray came here, I'm not sure that he had crystallized his ideas about what he was going to do in music as a career. He certainly was not sure that he was going to be a performing solo pianist. He was very, very much interested in chamber music, had already played a great deal of it, and was, of course, extremely interested in conducting, both for its own sake and for the kind of musical training that studying conducting can give anybody. At that time, I remember I started by testing his ear, which was just phenomenal. He could hear everything. We did various things, each more difficult than the last, till finally I played a piece for him. I think it was a Bach chorale, something that I would expect that he hadn't studied at the piano. It wasn't a piano piece. And I asked him if he could play it back for me, and he went to the piano, didn't quite play it back perfectly, but closely enough so that I could see that this was really a remarkable musical talent.
Traveling around, as I do a lot, means that close friendships aren't as close as one would like them to be. Carl Schachter, for instance, my teacher and the dean at Mannes, was one of my closest friends, and I still regard him as a very close friend, but distance prevents us from seeing each other. And I like close and old friends. I believe in keeping relationships and letting them grow with time. So I feel that I've tried as much as I could, but time and distance has prevented a lot of this from really blossoming.
It's an interesting thing that even now, I think the music that he most loves to do is music by Mozart, who was, in my opinion, the greatest of all opera composers, by Schubert and Schumann, who were very, very great song composers. Schubert certainly the greatest of all. And Chopin, whose music, of course, was mainly written for the piano, but whose melodic lines are so vocal in style. And what is special about Murray's playing is this vocal quality where the melody really speaks almost in words and sentences, and at the same time a very profound sense of structure and intellectual grasp of music. That combination, I think, is a very rare one.
I started to go to Marlborough Music Festival really as an outgrowth of my activities in the summer. This was a very important place for me, not only to meet musicians, but to meet people that were connected with the arts in many ways. I met, for instance, Frank Solomon, who was then the manager of Marlborough, he still is actually, and wanted to manage me.
Well, I think Murray and I have been friends for close to 17 years from when I first met him at the Marlborough Music Festival in Vermont, where Rudolf Serkin is artistic director, and Pablo Casals and many of the great musicians of our time have been. And we've been working together professionally for approximately 15 years.
The reasons he wanted me to play in Europe was he felt that that environment, the European environment, was an important part of, well, receiving music and adding to music, in that being in Europe, seeing European civilization, which is very different really from American civilization, would add something to my playing, as well as I would appreciate something in them and they would appreciate something in me. Unfortunately, I think that's still the case, that unless you win a major competition, you can't get established almost any place in the world, really. A dear friend of mine, Irving Moskowitz, had recently met the chairman of the Leeds International Piano Competition, Fanny Waterman.
And just before the competition began, in 1972, I had a personal call from Irving Moskowitz to say, would you book me in at a hotel in Leeds? I'm coming over with the winner. And I got most indignant. I said, now, the Leeds International Piano Competition is the fairest in the world. How can you prejudge or ask me to prejudge a result before the event has started? What I couldn't see was his smile at the other side of the Atlantic, and he was really pulling my leg. But he said, look, let me put it this way. If Murray Perahia isn't the winner, then I'd like to be in the hall to hear who beats him.
We feel that by a substantial majority, that the first prize at this international competition should be awarded to Murray Perahia.
I was frightened, quite frankly. This was very daunting, to win a major competition where I had not even considered myself a solo pianist of sorts. And I felt now a major decision in my life was taken. My first remembrances of Leeds were being sick in the infirmary for 2 days. I played my first round, and I went back to the infirmary. I had some kind of stomach bug that wouldn't go away, and I think it was largely nerves. And I was very surprised when I did win. Surprised isn't the only word. I think bewildered, because the competition entailed a lot of engagements. And I think something like 40 engagements came as a result of winning Leeds. I don't know why he's coming now. The ECO has had a long association with the Old Borough Festival, and together we have done many concerts at the Maltings. We usually go down on the day of the concert. We rehearse, basically have a lot of fun, and then finally play the concert.
Hello, Murray. Joining us.
Yeah, cheers. Cheers, Matt.
Some halls make you nervous. Remember the last
in Amsterdam.
Some halls make you nervous. Earliest
You
hall.
fell asleep in an orchestra that I heard about. I wasn't there, in Marlborough. And one of the violas fell fast asleep and started snoring during the slow movement, and he had to wake up for the last movement, but he didn't know where he was, apparently.
What a contribution, anyway.
Maybe he was the critic, actually. I met my wife, Ninette, by chance through somebody that worked at the BBC, a mutual friend. She introduced me one day at a dinner party, really, and we found that we were both Sephardic Jews, which is very unusual. We both had an interest in music. She passionately loves music. And we had a lot of other interests in common, literature and things like that. And so we started dating, and we were married this last September. I tour incessantly, and I'm constantly in hotels and out of hotels. And to have a companion to share this with is a great, great joy to me. And to have a smiling face at the end of a terrible rehearsal, I can't tell you. When I'm not involved in music, which is very, very rarely, because music is now almost an obsessive part of my life. One's constantly thinking about scores and thinking about ideas of pieces and things like that, and conceptions. When I'm not involved in music, I go to the theater. I tend to read a lot. Ninette and I love to go out as much as we can and visit with friends. And evenings, generally, I don't involve myself with music, except late evenings. I love to come home after a theater and play a little bit for myself and just quietly commune with the piano a little bit. I love playing here, and I love this festival. Marion Thorpe, the co-chairman of the Leeds competition, first brought me here many years ago, where I met Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears, the founders. Both of them have meant a lot to me, both personally and musically. Peter has been a very close friend, and we've done many recitals together in London, New York, and many other places throughout the world. I chose London to live in and as a base, really at the beginning as a result of the Leeds competition.
I was actually never, I was trained. I went to the Royal College of Music for 2 years, and I studied classical guitar, but never really with the idea of becoming a professional. I do love music very much, and I think that it's certainly very important in my relationship with Murray, because we spend a lot of time listening to music and indeed going to concerts.
We've now established the house. We bought this house here in London, and we've started with the few days that we have when we're not in hotels. We've begun to live here, and so this has greatly added to my life, I think.
I'm lucky in that my parents traveled a lot, and so I know a lot of languages, and that was very enjoyable. But I was also very lucky when we got married. It coincided with a translation I was offered to do of a book on Chopin, which is it's a very interesting book, but also it permits me to do my own work while Murray is practicing and while we are on tour.
I'm in the process of recording all the Mozart piano concertos with the ECO. We're going to record now the 503, and afterwards we're going to do a concert performance of the same work.
What about now? Hello? Hello? Are you
Someone who is very knowledgeable about the form of Mozart piano concertos is Dennis Foreman.
I want to ask you about conducting. Don't you find it sort of splits your mind if you have to be thinking the orchestra and your own set of performance?
Yes, actually it's funny. It doesn't split my mind. It more concentrates things for me. But I don't have the luxury of caring about every note in the piano part, which is sometimes beneficial and sometimes, for me, constricting. It depends. I like to do it both ways, with a conductor, without a conductor, but I get a very special pleasure out of doing it without a conductor, simply because we're all concentrating together.
I think most people who are going to listen to the concerto don't know, perhaps, that it's not all written by Mozart. A bit of it's written by you.
A bit of it.
The cadenza.
Yes, certainly the cadenza, and I do some decorations, yes.
The academics would say that you go outside the size of Mozart's keyboard in your cadenza. I think you do.
Afraid I do. I do by 2 notes.
You see, he only had this here to that F up there, didn't he?
I didn't even know he had it only up to there. I thought it was down to there.
Well,
but I go a bit lower, yes.
But, I mean, your top there, if you'd been Mozart, you'd be hitting the wood.
That's quite right, yes.
Is that all right, do you think?
Theoretically, it isn't all right, no. If one's going to be 100% purist. But then a lot of the more interesting cadenzas wouldn't be all right.
No, I quite agree. Beethoven's cadenzas
wouldn't be all right.
I see. It's a shame, because that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Bum jam.
Yeah, okay. We have to do numerous takes to get the recording as I would like it and as Roy Emerson, the recording producer, would like it.
Just 1 second.
You have to what?
Just 1 second.
Yes. Oh, I see, that's on the tape. No. Oh, I see.
Was the light working?
I didn't see a light. Is there a light? That's not good. I'm doing this great concerto of Mozart in C major, the Orchestral 503. It's one of the big concertos that he wrote at the time he was writing the Marriage of Figaro, something like 6 concertos at that, within a period of very few days almost. And this concerto has many, many contrasting moods. It begins with very solemn, grandiose chords, somewhat announcing something beyond us almost, something in another world. These chords are interrupted by silence, and I think the silence is as important as the chords. They're like the beginning of the magic flute. These chords announce something very great. They're like this. Etc., giving a very strong, impressive beginning to a very majestic piece. But right at the very beginning, almost when you feel that this can go on indefinitely, a very painful, somewhat nagging voice begins the most important thematic group, and that is in the minor, not in the major, as one would expect. Very, very strange writing. And this figure dominates the whole piece, dominates the second theme, which for the orchestra, the second theme that they announce, is again of a very majestic, magical almost character, bearing some relation to a tune in Figaro, but transcending that. It's like this. But again, its first announcement is not in the major, is in the, again, slightly subdued minor. Going into the relative major, coming back to the minor, and then Mozart dispels it again with a smile into the major and saying, this tragedy or this sadness, what you've had intimations of, doesn't really exist and cannot exist if one has the power and the ability, the courage to transcend it. And that's, I think, what all these scales are about, with this theme underneath. This theme that at first suggested something of disquiet. think that has so much courage. It's one of the most valiant kinds of subjects in music. And then you have all the piano's response to these things, which borders on the charming, on the elegant even. Notice even in something like that, you're not too far away from this disquieting theme. And then he does a touch of minor, and it's dispelled. So it's always alluded to, this dark side, and it's always overcome with, I think, many, many different ways, with courage, with an optimism, with something very touching. And I think this is the crux of the piece, that it's a happy piece in the end. I love challenges, and I feel my life thrives on doing new things as much as possible. I see it's very hard to say now what I will be doing. I mean, other than certain aspects of the repertoire concentrating on. I love Schubert very much. I'd like to do more Schubert. And Chopin for a pianist is a great challenge. And there's no end to understanding how that music should be played. So it's those things that I want to be working on. I don't think I'll ever stop.